do it, and that's good. So we're going to get going with that. My name is Barb Clark. I'm the Parent Support and Training Specialist at NACAC, at the North American Council on Adoptable Children. I am an adoptive parent, like many of you guys are. I have four children, although they wouldn't like me to call them children. They're teenagers and young adults. They are 17, 18, 19, and 20. And I've been working at NACAC for about five or 6 years. I can't keep track. But I've been leading support groups even before I worked at NACAC. I used to work at at Proof Alliance, which used to be called the Minnesota Organization on Fetal Alcohol Syndrome. And I led support groups for them as well when I worked with them for many years. So I'm a huge advocate of support groups and excited that we're going to be talking about them here today. So with that, I just want to show you guys a couple of little things, and hopefully you've noticed, and most of you guys have probably used Zoom a lot by now, 3 months into COVID, but some of you maybe haven't. But just so you know, there is a chat box on the bottom. Sometimes you need to hover your mouse over this screen to be able to see the chat box on the bottom. And if you're on a phone, it's even a little bit more complicated to find it. But please feel free to put questions or comments or things like that in there. And as a matter of fact, the very first thing that I have for you is I have a question. So get your fingers ready to type. You're gonna get busy here. I want you to type into the chat box if there are, what questions do you have about leading online support groups? Like, what are the 1 or 2 big things that you really want to make sure that I cover tonight? Because I'm a little bit, I just want to make sure that I'm hitting what it is that you guys are here for. And I'm really good at changing things and doing things last minute and changing things up. So if they're not things that I have already in the PowerPoint, I will add that in. So, so feel free to start typing in if you have any. So Lori Van Roo from Texas says, how to keep everyone engaged and ensure everyone's voice is heard. Mark in Nevada is saying, oops, and then it's moving on me, how to best promote the group. Yep, that's a big one. Emily is saying how to keep people engaged. Another one for that. David's saying, how do you keep someone on topic? That's a good question. Michelle, what are some ideas to help the group talk when they are quiet? Oh, we're going to for sure cover that. How do you get participation up and engagement? All right. How do you keep people interacted if no one if no one is participating? Yep. How to help people feel connected to each other virtually. I know, right? That was a hard one for the teachers to figure out with our kids too when they were doing it. How do we get people to attend the online support groups? How do you close the person down to give time for the next person? Definitely going to cover that. I just had to do that a few days ago in a group I was leading. How to keep the support groups confidential, not knowing who would be in the rooms. Yeah, that's a good one. What ground rules to consider? All right, these are all really awesome questions, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to have all of that covered. So excellent, you guys are super smart. We're on the same spot. But for 1 second, I got to go out of the screen share because for some reason I'm not seeing the right view. All right, okay. Going back to gallery view and going back to sharing the screen. Sorry about that. Okay, so, yep, the group, you know, one of the first things that we need to be doing and making sure that we have with any support group, whether it's in person or online, is that we have the ground rules established. And as most of us know, the most ideal way to do that is to do it with the members of your group, so they have ownership and that kind of stuff. And so maybe if this was an in-person group that you had that you have now transitioned to be online, you've already had some rules, and maybe it's talking about what additional ones do we need to add in there because of the fact that we're online, because that does change a few things. But otherwise, you know, at one of the first meetings, it's a conversation that you can have is getting everybody, and you can have some that you're proposing. We've got a list of them kind of here. Things about confidentiality, which is important, listening and accepting, not judging, all of that kind of stuff. That's really important, because if you don't have this foundation of your ground rules, when you have a member who's being potentially disruptive or whatever it is, it's much easier if you have these to come back to and say, you know what, these are the rules, and whatever behavior it is that's going on is breaking one of these rules. And so we just need to make sure that, you just bring them up again and kind of get everybody back on target is what you do. So that's one kind of list of some of the rules. But when you have online groups, virtual groups, two of the really important things that we make clear are that there are no recording of the support groups or no screenshots taken of the support groups. And obviously that is for confidentiality. So that's for confidentiality. And then the other thing that we generally recommend is that if participants, if there are children in the same room or going to be coming into the room, or other people, I've had people join support groups who are working in their cubicles, at work, or things like that. So then we just ask that they wear earbuds or headphones for confidentiality, because then the children can't hear what's being said by other group members. So those are two really important ones to make sure for virtual support groups that you have added in. This is an example of the support group rules that we use in our Minnesota. So NACAC is based in Minnesota, and one of our departments we have in Minnesota is called the Adoptive Foster Kinship Connection Department, and that is our department that does Minnesota support. And so the state of Minnesota Department of Human Services contracts us to support adoptive, foster, and kinship families. And so these are some of the rules that we have for our online groups. So it's about starting and stopping on time, no screenshots. The third one there is about confidentiality. What's said here stays here, but we understand that the lessons you're learning are things that you want to go out and share, being respectful, wearing the earbuds, headphones, and then giving everybody a chance to speak, because that was one of the questions that came up, if somebody's dominating the conversation. And then agreeing to disagree. We don't want to be judgmental. There are going to be things that not everybody who attends a support group is going to agree on. But we need to have respect for those, the ones that we disagree with. So those are kind of some of the rules that we use in our groups here. And what we did at the beginning when we first started doing our online virtual groups is we were doing a screen share just like I'm doing right now, and would put these up and just really quickly would go over them and say, everybody cool with them? Anybody want to add one? And they would say no. And I'm like, by staying in this group, it means you agree to these. And then I stopped sharing the screen. And then after so many groups and everybody was sick of them, sick of hearing the same thing every time, I would just pop it up there quick and I just say, just the two I'm going to highlight, no screenshots or recording, and you need to wear earbuds if kids are around, and the rest are here, and then I would kind of stop sharing the screen. So those are just a few examples, and I will be emailing these handouts to everybody that's participating, so you will be getting this information. So, or you can take pictures of this with your phone, of your screen if you want, if you want the stuff sooner. So again, confidentiality though with all support groups is one of the most important ground rules. I just can't stress that enough. I have seen when confidentiality has been breached in support groups, I have seen that tear support groups apart. And really interfere with the support that individuals are trying to get, because they have no more trust. And so confidentiality, I can't stress that one enough. Again, so when you're just like in-person support groups, virtual support groups, there's various types that you can do as well. You can do ones that have a training focus to them, that maybe the first 30 minutes or 45 minutes or whatever of the hour and a half or 2 hour session is a specific training topic with even a presenter, a guest presenter if you want. Those work really well. It can just be a general discussion, just a general support group. It can be a curriculum focused one. And one of the things I'm going to be sharing also with you guys, and if I know that many of you on here have in the last couple of years attended our parent leadership training model that we have. And you should have this Google Drive that we have, but I'm going to be sharing the Google Drive with everybody that is also participating in this webinar. And so one of the things that's on there are a couple of curriculums. One that is by the NCTSN, that is the National Child Traumatic Stress Network. And nctsn.org is their website. They have a vast array of resources that are completely free for parents and for professionals. And so that is, and one of the things they have is a resource parent curriculum, and I believe it's like 8 modules, and they give you a PowerPoint that you can use. They give you a speaker's handout, a speaker's curriculum, like guideline for how to lead it. They've got all of this stuff. It's all set up. It's all ready for you. So that's one thing. There is also Project Revive, which was created in New Mexico several years ago. They've got a nice curriculum that is in that Google Drive that is something that is available to you guys. Another idea that some people have had a lot of success with is kind of like a book club kind of format around books that have to do with adoption, foster, kinship, trauma, fetal alcohol, whatever kind of topics your group is interested in. And an excellent book for adoptive, foster, and kinship families is Wounded Children, Healing Homes by Jane Schooler and several other authors. And we've actually made that into a book club format with discussion questions, and that is also available on the Google Drive. So these are some ways, if you're having just general discussion group type support groups and people aren't participating very much, maybe it's time to try, a little bit, change it up a little bit and have some trainings or some topics or some book club or something like that, kind of shake it up a little bit and see if you can get people a bit more involved. So again, if you've got just a general discussion group, you can format that in a whole different kind of way. You can have, like, what I usually recommend is that we go around and do, just like in in-person groups, we go around the circle. Here it's like the Brady Bunch square, right? We go around and do introductions. And what I do recommend for, if we just have general topic ones, I recommend that you have a few kind of questions or topics or things ready to go if it isn't flowing and if people aren't talking, which can really happen at the beginning. If it's a brand newly formed group or a group of people that don't know each other, what we've really seen is that the people that were meeting in person and had kind of already a connected support group, when those ones moved online, it was much more natural because everybody kind of knew each other. But the ones where you've got kind of a hodgepodge of people from maybe all over your state or territory or area coming, those are still awesome and they're going to be great, but it takes a little bit longer because they're not connected yet, like some of those in-person groups. So having some kind of just topics or discussion questions or things like that ready is going to probably lessen your anxiety. Because I'll tell you, there was a couple where I was feeling kind of anxious at the beginning when some people were talking, and I'm sitting there in my head thinking, okay, what should I ask? What should I throw out? Da, da, da. So now I just have a list of stuff ready for each group just in case I need that. And some of the times I do, and some of the times I don't. Again, you can have a speaker or a presenter ready as well. That always works well too. I know that one of our groups here in southern Minnesota, my colleague Carrie Fletcher has had a couple of different people coming and talking about disability law stuff or Social Security or just different topics like that, and that's gone over really well. So this is actually a calendar of our groups that we have in Minnesota, just to kind of show you, and I'm sure it's a little bit hard to read. Hopefully, if you're on your phone, it's definitely harder, but I couldn't make it any bigger than that and fit it on the screen. But this is just shows like our calendar of some of the groups that we have here. So you can see there are some of our groups that are just the geographical groups that had been meeting pre-COVID that are now just meeting online. Then we've got several just kind of general support groups at different times. And we've got some that are like, when we've got like a Wednesday morning coffee with Carrie is what we call it. That's one of our group leaders who leads it on the morning. Then we've got, you can see the night owl group on Saturday nights at 9 p.m. That was my idea. Wasn't that a great idea? So now at the beginning of COVID, when I was stuck in my house constantly, it was great doing it. Now I'm not liking it. No, I like the group. It's kind of keeping my social life probably in a better place. But anyways, that's been really popular. That 9 p.m. on Saturday night, I had 11 people this past Saturday night at 9 p.m. on a Saturday. So we've got a specific dad support group that meets. We've got one that's specific to fetal alcohol spectrum disorders. So we kind of just have a various kind of a big array. We have one that's well, it's being moved and you can see it down there on July 1st, but like one that's embracing race in transracial families. So we have a huge transracial support kind of program that we have here. And we kind of split it up into 2 levels. And so there's kind of like level 1 who are newer parents to talking about issues around race and that kind of stuff. And then we've got people who are at level 2 who have been attending and who have gone through lots of trainings and read books and are kind of a bit farther along on their journey of understanding how to be an anti-racist kind of parent and that kind of stuff. So, so we've got that split up. So the embracing race is kind of for families who are kind of new to talking about it. So that's just a bit of an example of some of the groups that we have here in Minnesota. Oops, I went too far there. And then, so part of what I struggled with is like, I could spend a lot of time on a lot of the nitty gritty stuff with you guys of how to set up a meeting and all of that kind of stuff. But that's, if you spend a little bit of time in Zoom, you will figure it out. It's pretty, and I know that some of you guys might be using different platforms like GoToMeeting or Google Meet, or there's so many different ways of doing it now. But we're mostly focusing on Zoom here today. But setting up the meeting is pretty easy once you're kind of into the account. But one thing that I've seen happen many different times, a mistake that people have made, is you go in there and you kind of preset your meetings and then you advertise those links. You need to advertise the link then. So we put them on that calendar that you saw on that last page. So if I actually clicked on one of those groups, a pop-up box would come that would show the link to the Zoom meeting. And it would be connected to this Zoom account. But what some people then have been doing is when they log into the Zoom account, up on the top there, they just click host meeting and the meeting starts up. Well, if you have pre-set up a meeting, you don't want to do that because it's going to have a different meeting ID than the one that you had already advertised and was pre-set up. So I like to just kind of point that out because I've seen enough people make that mistake. So you've got your meetings kind of all set up in there, and then you just go into the meeting that was set up and you click on the start over next to that meeting is how you actually get the meeting to start and to start going. So just pointing that little thing out. Because I don't like, and the other thing too though is you can do pop-up groups. I've done a couple of those since during COVID in particular here, where just like, you know, it was like, I don't know, 11 a.m. on a weekday, and I just started up a group. And what I did is, in Minnesota, one of the ways that we network a lot with our families is we have a closed Facebook support group page for our families. And I think we've got about 2,500 families in Minnesota who are on that. And so, so I'll get on that and I'll post a thing saying, hey, in 5 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever, come to this link. I'm going to be leading a group, a pop-up group. So you can do that. You can, the other thing you can do is send out an email to your group of people or a text or something. Because I also, not only did I do that, but I did send an email out to some of my families who I've got on an email list that are always interested in groups. So pop-up groups can be fun too. Facebook actually has an option for that now. Within a closed group even, where you can do it on Facebook. I haven't found the technology to be as smooth as I found Zoom to be. And I know, again, there's, as I mentioned, many other platforms that you can use for support groups. We've tested it out with a couple of different ones, and we have found Zoom to be the most user-friendly. And obviously, I would assume most of you guys have heard about the Zoom bombers and some of the issues around that. From my knowledge, Zoom has gotten most of that fixed, and really most of that was happening with groups that were open and didn't have passwords and that kind of stuff is when the Zoom bombing stuff was happening. So that's my knowledge on that one. Online support group tips, again, practice beforehand. If you haven't led any yet, before you do, practice it a couple of times. So that's what I did. I got online, I made my husband sign in. I texted one of my friends who is an adoptive parent, and I had her sign in, and she had her husband sign in on his phone. And I had 5 or 6 people on, and I just sat there and kind of played around with it and all of the stuff on the toolbar and the dashboard and all that kind of stuff to figure it out. So I definitely recommend that you do that. And then a few weeks ago, then I was going to do a breakout room for the first time, which I'm going to be showing you guys kind of a little bit here. And the other great thing I'll say about Zoom, and most of the platforms have this, but Zoom has these awesome little videos on, like a 2-minute video on how to do a breakout room, or a 2-minute video on how to do polling, or whatever the things are, and or how to do a recording, or all of that kind of stuff. And they're usually pretty brief, and they're very well done. So Google those, because that's how I've learned a bunch about this too. But I had a bunch of my coworkers get on because I wanted to do the breakout rooms and to play around with that. So practice beforehand. That's really smart. Also, I recommend that you have, I always have my handy dandy little notebook with me. And during a support group, I still write people's names down in my book here, even if it's up on the screen, just because I like to have it in my notes, and just to know who came that time. But also, a lot of times during the group, you'll have a parent that's asking about something, and I'll be like, oh, you know what? I'm going to email that to you, Mark. Okay, I'll email it to you. And so then I have to write it down in my book, or I'm not going to remember. Sometimes I'll try to put it on the parent and say, Mark, you need to email me and ask for that. And then I'll send it to you. But it's just nice to have a notebook there. Again, as I said, starting with introductions, a lot of you guys who have come to the parent leadership training know that when I lead in-person support groups, my favorite way to do it is to go around and have everybody introduce themselves. If they're coming from a variety of communities, where do they live? Like here in the Twin Cities Metro, we'll have people from all different suburbs or something. But what the makeup is of their family, if they have adopted and bio or kinship, that kind of stuff. And then I will have them go around and say, and when they're doing that, when we're going around the circle, I'll always have them say, and is there a question or a topic or something that you really want us to talk about tonight? And if you don't, that's fine, you just pass. But I would say in my groups, the majority of in person, the majority of the people usually do have something that they want to talk about. And a couple of them will pass, and then I'll write that down in my notebook also, and I'll go back and forth. So I'll tell you, when COVID first started, when I tried that, all anybody wanted to talk about was COVID and being stuck at home, and their kids being, doing distance learning and all of that chaos, right? And so I kind of actually stopped with that question, because it was the same for everybody the first month. Now I think we're all kind of a little bit used to this unique new stuff that we're in. And so there has been more topics and things that are coming up now. But sometimes what I just do is I just kind of have sometimes a silly question, or just a question that helps us to get to know them better, that I put on there too. And I'll show you some examples of those here in a second. Another thing that you can do is you can limit the group size if you want. Some people prefer to do that, some people don't. We actually have been have been not limiting the size, but instead, if the group gets really big, above more than 12, what we'll do is try the breakout rooms and have them go into different groups. And I'll show you a little bit of a brief example on that. And I'm going to say this now, and I'm going to say this at the end too, because some of you guys might end up having to leave early, or having a kid having a meltdown. I don't think that'll happen to any of you, right? But it could happen. So one of the things you have to know is we at NACAC are here for you. If you have a silly little question even about how to do something in the support group in Zoom or whatever, send me an email, or give me a call, and I can talk you through that. We are here. We are happy to help with any kind of little snags or things, whether it's on the back end of setting things up or afterwards or whatever. So anyways, and then the other thing too is, a lot of groups are being really cautious about advertising the posts for the links to the Zoom meeting or to whatever platform you're using in public spaces. And so, because that's what could lead to the potential Zoom bombing. So just something to also be aware of. So here's some of the questions some of the different type of questions that you could actually have as the intro question, just to get people talking a little bit. I did this one a week or two ago. What fictional family did you want your family to be like when you're growing up? Or another one, actually I did the second one this past Saturday. What fictional family would you like to have dinner with, and why? And oh my gosh, we had such interesting things. Several people were like, well, I'm going to say Hogwarts. I know that's not a family, but it's kind of like a family. And they were all talking, so 2 people said that. One person said, and you're all not going to know who this is, but 8 is enough. Like it was one of the shows. I mean, there was some old shows that came up, and then they were talking about why, and somebody said Good Times. They really wanted to talk about, to see what they would think about some of the race stuff that's going on in today's world. It was kind of fascinating, and got people laughing, and it kind of set the tone for the night. And that's, and so those are, just different things you can do. You can have it be a more deep thing. If you don't want it to be a kind of a silly, fun thing, you could have it be, this last one of, fill in the blanks. My mind is, my body is, my spirit is. And that could lead to some fairly deep discussions throughout the group, right? So brainstorming and coming up with questions and having things like that can really, really help a lot. Here's another question. If someone wrote a book about your life, what would the title be? You could get some pretty interesting things from that, I think. Additional starter questions, and so there was a time during COVID where, we were all so on the edge of sanity that I was like, okay, let's all start off by talking about one positive thing that has come to your family through everybody being at home. And we had some great discussion from that. What activities do your families like to do together? Talking about self-care, that can be a good thing to do once in a while. Are you a dog or a cat person? I even did one of my groups a month or so ago. I was like, well, let's say your favorite beverage. Like I hadn't thought in depth enough about it. And that ended up being hilarious. Like this one father's favorite beverage was eggnog. And so we all had to like ask him further about that, because that didn't make sense to most of us. But so those are just a few examples of some of the starter questions that you can use for your groups. One thing I have to point out too, and I've seen people get burnt on this, you need to just be mindful of the fact that as the facilitator, as the host of a meeting, you have the power to mute people. And so that actually happened where there was some cursing happening unintentionally once by somebody, and the host was trying to yell to them, "We can hear you," because they had turned their volume down and their camera off and thought they had muted, but they hadn't. And the host was kept yelling, and this was a kid meeting. This was one for 8 to 12-year-olds, and we had an adult swearing, and the facilitator just kept yelling, "We can hear you, we can hear you." And then, so we had to problem solve that afterwards, but I had to point out to that facilitator, you could have muted them. You have the power to mute them yourself. So sometimes when you're leading the group and you're just all caught up in what you're doing, you forget that. So I just wanted to remind you of that power that you will have as the facilitator. Another thing, and most of you guys have probably figured this out, but sometimes some of the people who are coming into your virtual groups don't know this, that there's the gallery view or the speaker view, and it's up on the top right-hand side of your screen. And it's all a little bit different than when screens are being shared. But before the screen is being shared and you see a PowerPoint, for example, if you hit gallery view, you've got that picture that you're seeing on the left there. If it's speaker view, it's like the right, and you just have a big picture of whoever's talking. And so I've had a lot of people, in particular, a lot of our kinship providers or people who aren't as tech savvy, who have not been able to figure that out. And so just sometimes you have to do a little bit of tech coaching as well with the people. Another thing I like to point out is sometimes you have people who are going, quite often, almost in every group, you're going to have at least 1 or 2 people who have joined on their phone or their tablet. And the clue to you to know that, and there's only one reason why it's really helpful to know. If you look at the gallery view that's on here on the left, you can see the bottom, the man on the bottom, who's the second from the left. You can see that on the sides of his face, there's a gray box, right? You can only just see a skinny picture of him. It doesn't fill the entire rectangle. That is the clue that somebody's on their phone, or could be a tablet, but usually it's a phone. And so the reason why that's helpful to know is they can't see everybody. Now they can, and I've had to tell many of our families this too, that when they realize that that they could see other people, they have to swipe on their phone. If they swipe, they will see a split screen of 4 other faces of who's on. And if they, if there's 12 people on, if they keep swiping, they'll see 3 different screens of 4 faces. So sometimes you have to let the families know that, because a lot of times they don't, they haven't figured that out yet. And then, so sharing your screen. So sharing your screen is something that can be a great thing to do, because I've done that during several of my different support groups, and you guys were talking about how to engage people or how to get them talking. You could have a short video clip that you had set up already on your browser that you wanted to kind of share with the group, and maybe it's a 5-minute video or something like that. So I'm actually going to stop sharing right now, and I'm going to start sharing a different thing here in a second. I'm going to share my desktop now, and we're going to briefly watch a video, like one that is one, and if you've been to some of my trainings, you've probably seen, no, that's the wrong one. Okay, in a second, I'm going to do this. First, I have to get out of this, there we go. Some of you have seen this video. You can raise your hand if you've seen the video on confabulation, but it's one of my favorite ones because so many of our parents don't understand it. But I'm just going to play this for you briefly just to show you kind of how it works.
Likes a liar. When we think someone is lying to us, we may feel annoyed, insulted, or hurt. How could they think that we're dumb enough to believe their lie? Or maybe we feel betrayed. Or perhaps we did believe what they told us, and now that we discovered that it wasn't true, we feel as if we've been manipulated. But here's the thing. Oftentimes what looks like a lie and sounds like a lie isn't a lie in the traditional use of the word. There could be multiple legitimate brain-based reasons you're getting information out of someone that's incorrect. Responding to them as if they're intentionally lying to you and punishing them is essentially punishing them for something that's out of their control, and that doesn't help anyone. In this video, we'll talk about one of the more common brain-based reasons that you may find yourself in a situation with someone who appears to be lying to you, but isn't. In fact, they could be doing something that all of our brains do: confabulation.
All right, we're not going to watch the whole thing because some of you have already seen it. If you haven't, you really need to watch that. But so this is actually this on YouTube here, Nate Sheets at Oregon Behavioral Consultants has a whole bunch of amazing videos. So if you look down here, and a lot of them are like 6 to 12 minutes or something like that, and look at all these different topics, responses we have to escalated kids, using the stop and think plan to help with processing, how PTSD and developmental disabilities. I mean, he's just got some phenomenal videos on here. And so those can be a great thing to have kind of ready if things aren't flowing and you really feel like you need something to get people talking or having a topic to talk about. So, all right, so then I've got to open back the PowerPoint here. And one of the things that's really important to know is when you click on the, and right now, you guys probably all can actually even see on the bottom of your screen that share screen button. It's usually green. And because we haven't disabled it for participants, I don't think, at least, I don't know, nod your head, you guys, if you can see the share screen button on the bottom of your thing. Yeah, good. So I don't want you to do that now, because then you're going to override me and I'm going to have a power trip and it's not going to be fun. But anyways, it's something you can, and I've done that before too, where a parent actually during a group was talking about something and I said, hey, can you pull that up and share it right now? And so you can have your parents actually do that, or be prepared, or even just do it on the fly. But one of the things I want to show you that I learned about that is, so when you hit that share screen, and many of you can hit the share screen right now. I don't want you to actually, once the box pops up, I don't want you to hit share the next time, but you can see this is the box that pops up, except for it's going to show whatever is on your desktop that you have currently open. And one of the things I just want you to know, on the bottom left of that box, there's these two things that I've highlighted here where it says share computer sound and optimize screen share for video. You want to click both of those if it's a video like I just played. So I had to click both of those for that video to actually play so that the people in the Zoom could actually hear that properly. So that's just something that's important to know. Another thing is, so we're also doing some groups for kids and teenagers, and we're not really doing them like support groups because most kids and teenagers don't think that sounds like fun. And so like our 8 to 12-year-old group, we have a main staff person, Jerome, who's amazing, who does it. But last week he had a power outage, and 6 minutes beforehand, I got that task of doing that. And anyways, you can pull up the whiteboard. There is one of the things that you can do. And we actually sat and played Hangman and Pictionary. So all of the kids could sit and draw stuff and, do that. And we played Pictionary and Hangman and some games like that. And the kids just had a blast. So there's all these different options. And again, these are things I would just recommend you get in there and play around with. Another thing just to point out too is, I think most people know for Zoom, everybody gets a free account and you can have an unlimited amount of 40-minute meetings, right? But at 40 minutes, they will cut you off. At the beginning of COVID, I think they weren't as much, but several weeks into it, they were. And so otherwise you need to pay for an account, and I honestly can't remember exactly how much it is. There's different levels and we have some different stuff, but it's not super expensive by any means. But you also, just so you know, you can, I've done this before too, I've done this with my high school girlfriends, where as soon as it just kicks us all out, we just all join back in and do another 40 minutes. So just there is a way to kind of get around that, just so you know. So that's just a little bit on sharing screens. Now I'm going to talk a little bit though about breakout rooms. And so right now on your toolbar, your dashboard on the bottom of your screen, that's not going to be an option for you guys, because it's only an option if you're a host. Or maybe even a co-host. But on the bottom, if you're hosting a meeting, on the bottom dashboard, one of the options is breakout rooms. And if you click on that, then there's a box that pops up and it asks how many breakout rooms you want. And then it asks if you want them to automatically just assign people to a breakout room, or if you want to manually decide who's in what breakout room. So I've always just kind of done it automatically, but and then what happens is it would come up with like this box that you see here: breakout room 1 with those 3 people, breakout room 2 with those 3. If for some reason I didn't like that, I could, as you can see, you can click on move to and move them to a different room. So that's just an option. So what I'm actually going to do is I am going to send you guys into breakout rooms for a couple of minutes, and I'm going to try to pop in all of the rooms a little bit too to visit you, and I want what you're going to talk about in the breakout rooms is if you have been leading any virtual support groups. So you're going to be able to unmute yourself when I put you into these breakout rooms. You're going to unmute yourself, and you're going to talk about if you've been leading groups and how it's been going, right? And we're not going to do it super long. Everybody isn't going to have a chance to talk, but it'll just give you a little bit of a feeling for what it's like when you're in a breakout room. So that's just a little example of how the breakout rooms work. They're really easy to do. And you know, you can get a lot of good smaller group discussion. I actually did that. I did it recently with, I had a parent who had a ton of questions about some medical stuff. She had a child with some medical complexities. And I happen to have this other parent in the group who's like the queen of medical complex children. And I was like, hey, how about if do you guys want me to put you in a breakout room and you can talk about this for a while? And they're like, oh yeah, and they just absolutely loved that they were able to just sit the 2 of them and talk about what they needed to talk about. So just always remember that's something that you can just do, even just with 2 people who you think really need to talk about something, and it can work really well. All right, with that, we're gonna keep going. Current slide. And next. Okay, the other thing you can do is you can do polling. And so I'll just briefly show you. So you're going to have to participate again here. I'm going to put a poll up. I made a poll for us, and I'm going to launch it right now. And so you guys are just going to click the answers, click on your answers for any of these questions. And I'm going to be able to share the results with you in a minute here. So number 1 is I've never led a virtual support group before COVID, yes or no. Number 2, I have led virtual support groups during COVID-19. Number 3 is I have not yet led any virtual support groups. One thing I just want to point out, sometimes when you do this, excuse me, if you have a lot of different questions and sometimes they can have different answers, you might have to tell people they have to scroll down in that box because sometimes some of the questions are hidden. All right, so I'm going to end the poll now. And again, I think it's probably a little bit not as easy for people to do if they're on their phone, but it still can work. So I'm going to end the poll, and I'm going to actually hit share results. So you guys right now can see what the actual results are. 71% have never led a virtual support group yet. 61% of you have, you know, so we've got that. I have not led any virtual support groups ever. So 50-50. So there we go. That's just a little bit of an example of how you can do the polling if we need to be doing that. Kind of fun. A nice thing that you can do is you could just do a quick poll in the meeting, and you can actually, so that poll I created beforehand, you could create one while the group is going on too. By again, you would only be able to see this if you're hosting a meeting. On the bottom, that's one of the options is polling. And so you could just click on polling. You could ask a couple of quick questions, like maybe it's that you were trying to plan something and trying to figure out what day the group wants to meet or whatever it is. You can get a kind of a quick sense of stuff there. All right, so the other things that's important to remember is, and we always talk about this when we're doing our parent leadership training, 90% of communication is nonverbal, right? So think about how this changes your facilitation style when you're doing, you know, when you're leading a virtual support group as opposed to being in person. And that's why I prefer, I always prefer to use the gallery view so I can see everybody at least and kind of what their nonverbal kind of communication is and that kind of stuff. Listen for those clues and the, you know, the odd pauses or hesitations. You've got to just be even more intuitive on that stuff. And you'll find too, I mean, one of the couples that's in my group, my Saturday night 9 p.m. group every week, is a couple who the only space that they can get away from their children is in their bedroom. And so they're literally sitting up on their bed against the wall, against the headboard, and kind of laying on their bed while they're in group. And we just kind of laugh about it, you know, and, you know, I'm not going to lie, I've noticed the husband's eyes falling shut a few times in that group, right? So, and you know what, that's okay. If that's what he needs is a break and a little nappy, that's okay, right? This is the link to the Google Drive that, again, I'm happy to email you. We'll be emailing that, but that Google Drive, and you know what, I'm going to actually stop, and I'm going to share a different screen so I can show you and navigate around that Google Drive a little bit to show you what some of the resources are that are going to be available to you. All right, I got to get that out of the way. So we're going to go over here. There's all my emails from the day. Go to the Drive. And you know, I'm not super Google Drive smart, savvy, whatever the word is, but I'm trying to figure it out better. But one of the things that I have in here is, in my Google Drive, is the PLT resources to share. So PLT is our parent leadership training. Again, I know some of you were able to attend that. I am clicking on it and it is doing nothing. There it is. So these are a bunch of those different resources that I'm talking about. We've got confidentiality statements in here. We've got sample sign-in sheets. We've got stuff on self-care. We've got FASD stuff because that's my passion. Some of the handouts from our in-person trainings are in here too, which you can use. There's this little relaxing beach video, which that's something you can go and play. I'm not going to play that today, but that might be an interesting one to do in a group. There's just all these different things. Here's the Wounded Children Healing Home book club thing. Welcome to Holland. That's an interesting story you can talk about in a group. All these different things. But one of the things I'm going to show you is this very first one, which is what we've set, this first one, which is opening slowly. For some reason, my computer's going slow tonight. I think it's my boys are down playing too many video games. Anyways, on this is where, so there's a lot of links that we wanted to share with you guys, but so what we had to do was put them in a document. And for some reason, this document is not wanting to open. But anyways, that document right there, a resource link for support group leaders, has the links to that Oregon Behavioral Consultant YouTube videos. It has the links to the NCTSN stuff, all that different stuff. So this, and here's the other awesome thing, you guys can add to this. If you got some awesome resource that you love, you put it in here and share it with everybody. I've made it so that you guys can add, you can edit, you can open up this document that I can't open up today for some dumb reason, because that's how technology likes to play with me. But you could open that up and you could add some other hyperlinks in there and resources. So please know that we love to have your guys' involvement. There's my messy desktop too. Okay, so back to the PowerPoint, which I've got to open here. So the Google Drive, and again, feel free to, and Lucius Luther is one of the awesome people on here tonight, and he is one of my colleagues at NACAC. Lucius, if you're seeing any questions in the chat box, you can feel free to stop and ask me them. I should have asked you to do that too, but I forgot about that. Okay, so carrying on here. That's the one thing I'll say with Zoom is that, you know, when you're doing the share screen and you're having to share different things, there's this little lag, and that's not super fun, but it's part of the deal. Okay, a few other things here then that are a few other kind of just resources. These are different things too that you can find. You can Google and find all these things, and this could be something you could share on your screen as a topic. You know, let's talk about like this box down here on the left, what I can control and what I can't control, right? And that's something a lot of our parents, some of our parents, some of us, it takes us longer to figure that out, that a lot of this stuff about our kids and the behaviors we can't control and some we can. So that would be a great topic if things aren't flowing. The self-care checklist, putting up this funny quote on the top. If you want to nap while your kids are home, just say, wake me up in 30 minutes so we can clean the house. They will then do literally anything to avoid waking you, right? So just, like just some different kind of levity, some fun things, breaking things up. My Saturday night group that I had this last Saturday, we were laughing a lot, and there was one parent who was fairly quiet, and I said, hey, Allison, that was not her name, I'm gonna call her Allison. I said, hey, Allison, what's going on with you? What do you want to talk about? You got anything going on? And she was like, well, I feel like you guys are having too much fun laughing and I don't want to bring it down. And I was like, oh, that's okay. Bring it down because we'll bring it back up. That's what we do. We reframe things, and we want to hear the hard stuff, right? We want to hear it. And so we sat and talked about it. And sure enough, we had some ways to help her reframe. And eventually she was talking about that her 15-year-old went to a neighbor's for a sleepover, and they ended up sneaking out and doing some property destruction in the neighborhood, just one of those little things. And so we were talking about that. And at the end of it, we had some really serious discussion, but I was like, hey, you got an awesome, then we started kind of just joking about her reputation in the neighborhood now. They're that family, right? And then we all started sharing funny stories of our own reputations in the neighborhood that we all have. So there's just, so again, that's a way of talking about heavy and hard stuff, but bringing it to a place too where we can also laugh and not leave the group all down and, depressed. Again, as a group facilitator, you're neither a teacher or an expert. A group facilitator should be like we like to call the guide on the side, not the sage on the stage. Oh, that's a quote. On the stage is what that's supposed to say there. But anyways, a lot of times when I'm leading groups, people will sit and be sharing a story and then they're like, oh, Barb, I have a question. And I'm like, I'm glad you have a question, but don't say Barb because this is for all of us, right? And I intentionally, as the group leader, try very hard not to be the first person to answer or to respond, because I am the facilitator. I am not the teacher. I'm not the expert. I am just another parent. And again, some of you guys might be child welfare professionals and not be adoptive, foster, and kinship parents, and that's awesome. We do recommend that you partner with an adoptive, foster, or kinship parent then to lead the groups, because we've just found that it's much more effective. But we don't want to be put in that role of being expert. And so and that's one of the beautiful things about support groups that just makes me, I just like to sit back and just sit and listen to them all start giving this great advice. And I'm like, oh, this is just exactly what this is about. This is what we're here for. And there's nothing that feels better when you start to see the people in your group supporting each other and giving good advice. And then there's the occasional time when they're saying something stupid that you want to be like, oh, that's not the right advice. But then we deal with that too. That happens rarely, I'll say. So some other keys to success are making sure that people feel welcomed and respected and important and valued. And so that's why it's important at the beginning to do introductions. And a lot of times, I really like to start things on time for the most part, but I will, for the first couple of minutes, just be like, oh, hey, Dave. Hey, Sue, I'll just, do a little bit of like kind of brief welcoming. I have to be careful because sometimes Dave might all of a sudden start launching into what he wants to talk about in group this week or something. And so I'll be like, Dave, hold on. We really want to hear about that, but let's wait until we get started and do introductions or whatever it is. So, you got to just it's okay to interrupt. It's okay. We've got to do some of that. So some of the characteristics of effective group leaders are optimistic, having open-mindedness, being self-aware, having good capacity for empathy, ability to maintain appropriate boundaries. That's a really important one. Leadership skills, and then also having a strong support system around you. So we in Minnesota, Lucius and myself and our other coworkers who lead support groups, we have our very own private Facebook page just for us. And that's often where we'll go and be like, oh man, this happened in one of my groups last night. And we'll sit and talk about it and support each other. So it's important too that you as a support group leader are connected with other people who are doing this and getting support. And one of the things for that too, and I should have put this in my link too, but I'm gonna remember to email that to you, is we do have, a lot of you guys are a part of our NACAC Parent Leadership Network on Facebook. If you're not, you can go into Facebook and Google NACAC, NACAC Parent Leadership Network, and request to join. And I promise I will admit you. I don't admit everybody. Sometimes we get some bizarre people that are trying to join in that aren't aren't adoptive, foster, or kinship people. We get a lot of college people. There's another NACAC that does something with college admissions, but so sometimes those people are trying to get into our group not knowing what group it is. But that's a group also where you can go and get support or ask questions. Like I remember, I'm trying to think, one time somebody got in there and they're like, oh, we're trying to think of icebreakers for our group, and people gave ideas. And once they wanted it, they were having like an ice cream social, and they were like, does anybody have any icebreakers that are around ice cream? And people did. And so, that's kind of just a cool spot and resource for you guys to get support too. Another thing I like to say as support group leaders, you're a reframing coach, right? That's one of the things that we as adoptive, foster, and kinship parents need to be doing all the time for ourselves when our children are having behaviors or when we're in some odd situation has happened. Let's try to reframe it and not always look at it from the negative perspective, and looking at it from like what actually is going on here and looking deeper. And so that's a lot of time what I do a lot of in the support groups that I'm leading is just kind of reframing things and helping people look at it from a different perspective. And that was, again, that parent, actually, Allison, who was talking the other night about, her kid and the property destruction. They happen to be in a very white suburban community here in the Twin Cities, and their son is brown skinned. And so she was talking about that and how she was trying to talk with him about it. And he seemed oblivious to that. And he was like, yeah, but you're white. And I was like, oh, okay, we really need you in our Embracing Race support group so that you can start having these conversations with him. And that's actually what eventually I was recommending that she does. But we ended up into this really good discussion on race and transracial parenting and all of that. And then what I said is, I said, I'm actually really glad that this stuff is going on right now, because I think it's opened your eyes. Because she literally just said that. So I said, you just said this has opened your eyes. And I was like, for somehow George Floyd wasn't enough of an eye opener, but okay. Her eyes have been open now since this property destruction and the conversation she had with her son. So that's really important that we're helping people reframe things. Other quick reminders, again, being positive, as I said, having everybody talk at the beginning, understanding there's going to be conflict once in a while. It usually doesn't happen in every group, but it's going to happen sometimes, and that's just normal. Most of us hate conflict. If you're in Minnesota, we got this Minnesota nice thing, and we avoid stuff like that at all conflict, but at all point, but it can happen. And here's something that I am hugely into, is that if we don't have a good amount of laughing in every support group, we're probably not going to have people coming back. And it's a really good, first of all, support groups, whether in person or virtual, are self-care, right? It is self-care to attend a support group. Laughing is good self-care. There's lots of research showing that laughter lowers blood pressure, reduces stress hormones, triggers release of endorphins, and improves cardiac health. So figuring out ways that we can laugh in each group is really, really, really important. That one doesn't need to be in there, so I'm skipping that. Balance is really important too. Making sure, it's really hard as a support group leader to make sure that you find that right balance of sharing enough challenges or things that are going on in your own family, but also not making it become a group that's just about you. and your family's issues. So you got to find that balance, because I have actually seen support group leaders who rarely ever share something that's going on in their family. And then that starts to lead people to think that they've got it all figured out and that they're like this perfect parent. And what am I doing wrong? You know, Barb isn't having these struggles. Why am I? She must be doing so, you know. So, but yet we also don't want it to become the Barb group, all about Barb's family and her chaos. And I got lots of it. So we got to be careful on that. Knowing local resources is really, really important. And so that's, and this is again for any support group, whether it's in person or virtual. I spend a lot of time trying to learn more about like waivers, PCA care, SSI, all the acronyms out there in the rainbow, right? I will sign up for free webinars that I find in our state that are about learning about guardianship or whatever the things are. I try to learn about that stuff so that I can help families understand it. But the other thing I do is I have a mental note in my head of families I have who are really, really savvy on a specific thing that maybe I don't get very well. Like I'm not super savvy on understanding waivers and how to write a waiver budget, but I have a couple of families who have experienced that a lot and who are really happy to help families with that. Same thing with medical complexities I'm not very experienced on. So that's why I'll remember, oh, this person knows, and I'll connect those people together. Again, this goes with the laughing, keeping spirits light. And when I do the parent leadership training, I always talk about this too. Sometimes when I'm leading a group, and because sometimes there's those groups where everything is really heavy. Like I led a group once years ago, I'll never forget it. We were in a coffee shop and I think we had 8 or 9 people, and the things that they were like, one, a grandparent provider, kinship provider, her grandson had just tried to hang himself. Another, we had a father whose son had just tried to set his girlfriend's apartment on fire. We had, I mean, just all these really huge things and lots of crying. And that was the last time we met at a coffee shop. We moved that to a library after that because we were getting a lot of looks in that coffee shop. But it was really, really, really heavy. And so sometimes if things are just really heavy, we have to kind of lighten it up and make sure, because we don't want everybody just leaving kind of in a traumatized place. So some things that I'll do, I always joke, once in a while when a parent is sharing something, again, not a super heavy thing, but an annoying thing that a kid did or something, I'll be like, oh, well, you should try a sticker chart for that, right? Because most of us parents know that sticker charts are pretty ineffective for our kids who have trauma histories or fetal alcohol or different neurodiversity issues. And so, and we all kind of get sick when we hear that word. So then we'll all just kind of start laughing. I've sometimes just stopped and said, I've stopped the groups and I'm like, you know what, right now I want everybody to go around the circle and share some of the wackiest advice you've ever been given of how to parent your children, or something that you were doing wrong or whatever. So just figure out a different way to kind of just change the tone if it's just getting way too heavy and too deep. And again, you could have some of those quotes ready and bring up some of those quotes. Sometimes we've done some show and tell even on the virtual groups. And so like you could sit there, and if it's a regular group that meets weekly or biweekly or just monthly, you could say, hey, next month, come prepared with what your favorite quote is, or with your favorite meme or something like that. Or just show us, we want you to show us something on the screen that is something that's really important in your life, or something like that, you know. And parents love that. You think that that's what the kids want to do, you know, kids love show and tell. Well, parents actually have loved that too, to be able to show something that's important to them, or maybe it's a childhood memory thing that they have, whatever it is. And then we always like to do the caution on making sure that that we're aware that support group is not therapy, and being really careful of not crossing that boundary. Because that is not safe, it's not healthy. We're not licensed therapists. If you are a licensed therapist and you're leading a support group, you've got to clarify if it's a therapy group or not, but it shouldn't be if it's just a support group like this. So just be really, really cautious on that. Here's a few other kind of questions that you can use to keep the flow as well. You know, talking just about things like what kind of therapy has been most helpful for your children, if any. What is the piece of parenting advice the best piece of parenting advice anybody's given you? When was the last time you were alone in your home? Right? So, I mean, it can be funny or it can be something that's actually a useful thing. So again, that's where I just recommend that you guys sit and kind of brainstorm a whole list of things that you can kind of go through. Another thing that you can do is you can actually assign that to a member. You could say, okay, you know what, this week I want Sarah for next week or next month or however often you meet Sarah, I want you to come with a question, an intro question that we're going to have for the group. So you can also just assign little things like that to people, and then that means at least Sarah has to show up next month. And then you should remind Sarah and send her an email or a text or something reminding her about that. As far as advertising, and that's really the main part of the presentation here. But what I want to look at some of the questions. But I know some of you guys, some of the questions that you had talked about was how to advertise, how to get people to attend. One of the things that I've learned is that if the groups are being run well and the people are getting what they need out of them, they're going to come back. And so if not every time, because we all have lives and conflicts and that kind of stuff, but if we're advertising it well and it's being facilitated properly, people are going to keep coming back and looking forward to it, whether it's in person or virtual, to be honest. And so that's an important thing to remember. For as far as advertising goes, it kind of, in different communities, it depends on kind of what your network is that you have with your adoptive, foster, and kinship families. In Minnesota, one of our best ways that we do it is we've got, as I said, this closed Facebook support group. And we will post it in there all the time. Now, I definitely have some families I work with who don't like Facebook, and I'm not going to say that I actually like Facebook, but I have to use Facebook for my job, and I have to tell my husband and kids that all the time when they see me on Facebook and they think I'm just screwing around. I'm like, no. Well, the majority of the time when you see me on Facebook, I'm actually working. But so that, that's been a great one for us, but not everybody does that. So I have those people's emails, my families who I know don't do that, but even actually my families who use Facebook, I do that. And so what the sign-in sheet example for in-person groups that you're going to see in that Google Drive, what I like to do is I like to have their name and their email and their phone number, and then I have a column where they can check what is their preferred mode of communication. Is it email, texting, or calling, right? And so, and I have several, in particular, some of my older kinship grandparent caregivers who prefer phone calls. But then I have some of them who love texting too. But so, and you can set up a WhatsApp group too. That's another thing. I don't know if anybody has ever used WhatsApp, but it's a great app for group messaging. Instead of having your text messages blowing up all the time, you can just use a WhatsApp group message, and then you just go check it once or twice a day or however often you need to. And so you can set up a WhatsApp group for the people who are part of your support network. But you can also, try to get the information to the adoption foster licensing agencies in your community. We just had a new parent who joined our groups, a group of last month, and somebody in Dakota County in the Southern Metro, a worker I've never heard of, is who gave this parent the info about our groups. We also have a listserv of emails, just like a newsletter that goes out to our Minnesota families, and we include every week we have a list of the online support groups. And no matter what you're going to have, we would have people for every week being like, we would put a post on the Facebook page about the support group, and the next day the people would be like, oh, I missed this. How come I never see it? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I don't know what else we can do for you. Like, we're posting it on there an hour before the group and each morning. And, it's in the email, I'm like, there's only so much hand holding we can do for people. So you also have to kind of just know that your limitations. Um, uh, I don't know if there's any other questions that I haven't hit right now. Lucius, would you say it looks like I've hit most of them? If there's anything that I haven't hit that you really are dying to hear right now, type it in there again, even if you had it, because it's so far up there now. I can't
Barb,
find it. Yes, Lucius.
somebody wants to know how you maintain confidentiality in the group, and you haven't really touched on actually having people put their names on.
Yes. So confidentiality, one of the things we do ask people, if you see, like right now, I don't know if all of you guys have clicked on the participant button on the bottom of your toolbar. So then on the right side of your screen, a list of participants pops up, right? And a lot of people, when they sign on, their name will say, say Adam's family, or, well, that's a show, actually. I didn't mean that. Johnson family, I should say, right? But it might just say, it might have their kid's name because their kid last used Zoom or something like that. So we always ask to make sure that their first and last name is part of it. Because if you're in person, you're going to say your first and last name too. And so, so that we always are asking people to have their full names on there. But as far as confidentiality, the biggest thing that we do let people know, it's even like with our Facebook groups, it's as, we ask people to respect the rule of confidentiality. And we have rules about no screenshots or no sharing things that are from our group on Facebook. But every once in a while, and like it's only like once every couple of years, somebody violates that and we kick them out, is what we do. If somebody violates confidentiality, that's probably grounds for you're not going to be able to participate in the groups, right? So the biggest thing with confidentiality is just, the screenshots and the recording is not okay. And also, you shouldn't be going and saying who was in your group to other people who weren't in that group that day. I mean, it's one thing to your coworkers if you're working somewhere to be talking about something, but it's not something you should tell another parent that, oh, hey, Allison was in my group on Saturday night. That's breaking confidence even. And that's why I don't even say what Allison's real name is when I'm doing this, right? So, yeah. All right, is there another question? Is there a meeting length that is too long? Oh, I think anything more than 2 hours would be pretty long. I mean, I get sick of, who's sick of Zoom and screens and computers? Lucius and I were just saying before we were doing, I mean, not that I'm not happy to see all your beautiful faces, but it's not fun to just be doing everything on Zoom or online, but it's better than not doing it, right? It's better than not seeing people. It's better than not doing training or having groups. But I think, I think more than 2 hours is hard. It depends. I think if you had a combination of training with it and then support group, and a break in the middle if it was more than 2 hours. But we actually, even for we're doing a lot of our parent leadership training online for places as well. And we're just doing it in 2 hour segments and breaking it up and doing it over a couple of weeks instead of having, because even sitting there for four hours is a lot. So 1.5 or 2 hours is kind of the golden time that I've seen for support groups. I don't know if anybody's had any other experience or anything on that. Would NACAC be open for others outside of our area to join one of our support groups? Our support groups are only for Minnesota families because Minnesota DHS funds them. So our support groups, we cannot have non-Minnesota families in them. The state won't let us, but we can, we can always, as I said, we're always happy to help you guys with leading support groups, with getting them going in your community. I'm happy every once in a while to come and be a guest speaker for 20 minutes at a group, even if there was a topic you wanted us to talk about. We're definitely here at NACAC to kind of be here for you. And so I see, it looks like somebody so you guys, looks like you guys are wanting to connect privately, and you guys can send each other a private message on the chat right now too, with each other's emails if you want. And maybe you've been doing that behind the scenes, but good job. So any other kind of final questions or comments even, or anything that you guys as people who have been leading groups want to share with everybody? And you can unmute yourself and say it if there is. We covered it all. That's what I like to hear. Doesn't happen often, but anyways, yeah, I mean, I can't say this enough. We're here for you. Kim Stevens is my colleague, who she and I are the two that do this. Normally we're in person doing groups. She's on a van trip across. She lives in Vermont. She's in Minnesota, up in Grand Marais, Minnesota right now, on a trip across the country. So she couldn't join us tonight, but she sent her wishes to everybody. And oh, here's a question from Lori Van Roo. For vetting new members to a Facebook group, what is the best way to verify that they actually are an adoptive family? So what we have set up is we use SurveyMonkey because it's free. And so on SurveyMonkey, we have a list of questions, including their name, their address. And Lori, I'm happy to send that to you, the list of questions that we ask them before we admit them to our private Facebook group. So I'll send that to you, Lori. I'm going to put that in my notes. And that's others, you know, if people are ever interested in starting up Facebook groups, that's another thing that we can help with. At least during the rest of 2020, we don't have funding past 2020, but we're here for you until December 31st. And NACAC will still be around, but some of our funding that we used to have that funds the work that we do will be going away. So we're looking for new funding, and we're working on that, and we're hopeful. So just something to be aware of. All right, if there's no other final questions, I'm gonna say goodbye and good luck to you guys, and reach out. And again, I've got a list of stuff I'm gonna email you all, and join that Facebook NACAC Parent Leadership Network group. Send a message to join if you're interested. So have a good rest of the summer, everybody. Thanks for all that you guys do for our families. Support groups are really important, and all of your work is appreciated.